Hi, welcome to the project management information session. We're happy to see you today. We're going to get started and tell you a little bit about the program. And then if you have any questions for us at the very end of the presentation, you'll know who to reach out to. We'll have our contact information. So are you ready to reach the next level in your project management career? That is what we're going to be talking about today. My name is Becky McKee. I'm one of the presenters, and I'm also the program manager for this program. Chris Grassmonk will give him a bigger introduction later in the slides, but he's also with us today, and he is the project management professional instructor, as well as the project management series instructor for that as well. April Cohn is with us today, and she is our student recruitment specialist. So you'll have contact information for her at the end of the slides to reach out for her for any additional questions that you might have in taking this next step. So what we're going to cover today is on the slide right here, the value of certification, what project managers need to know, how to prepare to succeed, how to invest in your project management career by taking this course, and then any questions that you might have.
Hi, let me introduce myself. I'm Chris Grassmonk. I've got about 25 years in project management or project management experience, primarily focused in the government, federal government and DoD experience, but also supported commercial activities as well. I'm currently serving as the Director of Governance and a delivery executive for a small boutique technology company. Federal clients and software development, some cloud migration, as well as technology modernization for some of our key federal government clients. I also served about 9 years, going on 10 years actually, as the vice chair for a local Shenandoah Valley community of the world's largest PMI chapter, also known as PMI WDC, which obviously is based out of the DC area. I've spent about 5 years, a little over 5 years, as the PMP instructor here at Laurel Ridge, and I really enjoy it and really enjoy sharing project management knowledge and watching folks grow in this industry. Last but not least, I'm the father of 2 boys, been married for a little over 20 years. I'm also a mentor and coach in project management. I'm also a local and international speaker, at least spoke internationally once on project management. I'm also most recently a youth baseball taxi driver. My youngest is big into the local baseball scene, and I'm also a huge fan of baseball. So enough about me. We'll dive into a little bit about the value of this PMP certification. So we can go to the next slide. Yep. So the value of this certification, and I really emphasize it during the course, is it proves and separates or differentiates yourself from other project managers within the industry, right? It shows that you're committed to professional development, and that's the constant education, constant knowledge growth, constantly learning the new methodologies, right? Despite the fact that Agile's been around for a number of years, it's still being new lessons are being learned, and those lessons are being applied to future new projects. So this shows that you are committed to this project management field. It also demonstrates to not only your current employers, but your future employers that you have a experience required to meet those rigorous prerequisites within your organization. Again, committed to the project management field, committed to being better at your job as a project management professional or project executive or project analyst as well. Also gives you an opportunity to build on that knowledge, build those skills, build and learn new processes to better effectively and efficiently run the projects that you've been assigned and have worked on, right? These skills are easily transferable from project to project, company to company. I've worked all over the all over the country. And as mentioned, I've also had opportunities to speak internationally. So these skills, as mentioned there, are transferable, are applicable to all sorts of different industries. My industry and primary focus has been software development. But early in my career, I worked in satellite communications. And so these project management skills that you learn, this project management knowledge that you learn during this course and during the opportunity to gain the certification, these skills can go industry to industry and company to company. It also separates yourself from your uncertified peers, right, and your colleagues. We're looking, why is this certification important to me? What is the value? What is the value that it brings to me? Well, part of that value is it separates you from your peers. Therefore, a potential increase of salary. The difference in a recent study was about 32% in the United States between certified project management professionals and uncertified professionals. On average across the globe, it's about 16%. There's a tremendous focus on the certification over in Asia, China, as well as European nations, and of course here in the United States as well. You go to the next slide. Just continuing on some of this, the value of the PMP certification, right? Again, as I just mentioned, it's globally applicable and universally recognized, right? There's about 1.2 million PMP credential holders, as it says there at the bottom of the slide, right? That means that they're certified not only here in the United States, but all over the world, and that this certification is recognized as one of the premier certifications to achieve. It's very rigorous in the education and rigorous in the exam process. It's a accredited credential from PMI. Again, it's world's largest membership, as I mentioned, 1.2 million, and growing by, I'd say, a little over 100,000, almost 150,000 new certified PMs every year. It increases, as previously mentioned, the earning potential in the United States up over 32% over your uncertified peers. So if you work for an organization that respects the value of this certification, you should see that bump in salary, at least the opportunity to go to your leadership or your HR department and ask for that raise once you do achieve the certification. So it does present not only your organization a great value, but you personally a great value. Again, you can apply these processes and knowledge to your current organization, as well as take it on to future roles. Next slide. What does a project manager need to do in order to achieve the certification, right? To achieve or earn this PMP certification, you must meet the education and experience requirements, and we'll get into those in a greater depth in an upcoming slide. You also have to agree to a professional code of conduct, right? I've operated since receiving my certification back in 2012 under this code of conduct, meaning that I support the growth of the industry. I ensure that I'm an open and honest communicator, not only to my fellow employees and project team members, but also my clients that I serve and support. In addition, of course, you have to pass the PMP exam. It is a very rigorous and known as one of the most difficult exams to pass, but I can assure you, if you take this course, you're well on your way to passing that exam. Well, it's no guarantee. I've got a pretty high percentage of passing that exam. If you got any more questions regarding the exam specifically or what it takes to achieve the PMP credentials, the link there to pmi.org, who supports the exam and has drafted the exam, is right there at pmi.org. And you can get your PMP handbook there for additional details. Next slide. The exam has changed back in about 2019. It changed and has gained a different focus. For about 20 plus years, it was primarily focused on processes. You had to know and be able to apply 49 processes. They've recognize that the industry, the PM industry itself, has changed. And so the focus of the exam and the course is focused on people. As you can see there, it's about 42% of the course material, as well as the exam material is focused on how to manage people and, of course, achieve those project goals. It did not completely drop out the processes. It still is part of the exam and part of the course content at about 50%. And then the business environment. The business environment is just that. Where does your organization, where do these projects operate or exist in? So that's about 8% of the exam. So again, we'll focus most of our time on those top two, but we will spend a little bit of time on the business environment. Next slide. How to get you prepared to succeed. So a couple of years ago, when we first started doing the PMP exam prep class, we had an opportunity either to develop our own content or reach out to and partner up with Shirtwise, which is a Holmes Corporation subsidiary. And so they've got some very good material, and we'll get into exactly what that material looks like, but it provides you the right content so that you have the tools to succeed, the tools to pass this exam, the tools to use as reference material in your future work once you do pass the project management certification. It gives you an easy way to learn. Not only do you have to sit in the class as we review the material and I provide you some real life examples, but it also gives you an opportunity at night as you study for the exam to use this material not only in a hardback or paper form, but also online. As it says there, it provides you also practice and gives you feedback on those practice questions or questions at the end of the chapters, as well as practice questions based on those different areas that I just mentioned, those three different domains, the people, process, and business environments. So it's really focused, again, on making sure not only do you know about project management and program management, it also focuses on making sure that you have all the information needed to pass the exam. And of course, that's where I come in, is providing you guidance and instructions over the course of about 9 weeks, 2 classes a week, to make sure that you're able to relate not only your experience, but also provide real life examples that are applicable to these different areas. Again, those 3 different domains that I mentioned and the processes that are involved in running and executing your projects and ultimately passing this exam. Next slide. So some of the tools, again, that Certwise learning system has provided us to help you get prepared for the exam. Again, these tools are very comprehensive. They've been proven effective and they are up to date. So as new information is identified out in industry or PMI makes minor tweaks to the exam, this online material is updated in real time, and they also give you errata sheets that you can download and print to insert into your notebooks or your spiral bound books there. So again, all this information is based on the most recent edition of the PMBOK guide, and that's the 7th edition. It changed right around just prior to the update to the PMI PMP exam. So at the first day of class, you get your reading materials. Those come in both printed and online formats. You receive 2 books, a book of information that's easily readable, easily digestible as you study for the exam. And then also you get a handout, a book with the slides, so it's easy to take notes of the information that we covered during the class. We also provide interactive online study tools, additional resources, and most importantly, I think it's about 900 practice questions. As I mentioned, they're chapter questions as well as domain questions covering the people, processes, and business environments again. So I'll pause there. I do see that we have one person joined over on the phone. I don't know if they have any questions, or we can hold those until the end. All right, next slide. Again, some of this comprehensive materials, as you see, those 2 books that you'll come to know and love over the course of the PMP exam prep class, provides you that in-depth exploration of the 3 different domains that we test or that are tested on the PMP exam. In addition, it gives you a glossary of key PMP terminology based on the official PMI definitions. And so a personal experience of mine is I had spent, I'd say about 10, 12 years as a project manager prior to gaining my PMI PMP exam. So I had a pretty good experience underneath my belt before studying and sitting for this exam. Fortunately or unfortunately, oftentimes you have to unlearn some of the corporate jargon that you may use to run your projects within your company. What this PMI exam tests you on is their definitions, their methodologies. These methodologies are easily applicable into your projects or into your organization, but they are things that are tested, or specific things that are tested on this exam that PMP expects you to know as they've documented it. And of course, they've been around for a number of years, for a little over 50 years now. So these are proven processes, proven information that you can take forward. As I mentioned, there's progress check questions included at the end of each chapter. Make sure that you are learning what you're taught, learning what you're reading. And then all of this is, presented in easy to read and easy to understand format. Again, covers and based on that PMBOK guide, which is the most recent edition, is the 7th edition. Which the difference there is the transition away from a focus on predictive, or also known as waterfall methodologies, and starts to bring in the agile methodologies and the hybrid methodologies, right? So the right project methodology to apply all depends on the type of project. And so PMI recognized that and has started to change the information that they test on to make sure that it includes all of the methodologies. Next slide. Okay, so, some of the online tools here. Becky, I don't know if this is your slide or if you want me to continue here.
I can go ahead with this slide.
Sure.
So this also just sort of repeats a little bit about what Chris was mentioning before about what all is included in your the tuition that you pay for the course. We can't speak highly enough of the books and curriculum that we do use, because it really gives you every opportunity to expand your knowledge outside of class as well as inside of class. So these are just some other things that are included: pre-test, video tutorials, chapter quizzes, process group quizzes, flashcard sets to really study on your own, post-test materials, an actual PMP practice exam, progress reports on how you're doing in the course, and then an additional resource center. And I know you're joining by phone. Some of you are joining by phone, but wanted you to know that there is a picture on the screen that just shows how friendly and intuitive the actual online material is. We can go to the next slide. So this slide really just talks about what it's like in the classroom. As you know, and have learned, our instructor is an expert in the field. And so what that brings to the classroom is not only do you have great materials that you're using in the classroom, but you have an experienced project manager guiding you through that step by step. Also, so you know, the reason we do this class in person is because of the networking that it actually allows in the classroom. So in addition to learning the material to take and be successful in your exam, you also have that opportunity to network and collaborate with other peers in the field to really bring that knowledge to life. The instructor also helps you apply for the exam. So there is an application process that you have to go through, and that can be daunting, and understanding, taking the experience that you've had and putting it in the right terminology that you need in order to apply for the exam. And he'll get into that a little bit more, but wanted you to realize that there is one-on-one guidance to help you comprehend the skills you learn in class, as well as to apply for the exam. And then lastly, just so you know, the way the course is set up, we have set it up in an accelerated learning style so that you can get through the content, but not have to change your life around in order to attend the course. Next slide. So as far as taking advantage of possible ways to offset the cost of your course, wanted to just bring up just some ways other folks have actually tried to offset the cost of the course. A lot of folks don't think about asking their employer to help. Employers do seek this. I mean, employers really do think that this credential is of value in the workplace, and they do seek folks that have this credential when they hire for a project manager. So because of that, just wanted to let folks know that they should actually ask their employer if their employer would be willing to either pay for the course outright or reimburse the employee after the fact of showing that they completed the course and or obtained the credential. Also, if you're unemployed, you can seek out the opportunity for WIOA funding. And then finally, we also have Sallie Mae loans. So in order to, when you take the course, if you give us a phone call or reach out to April at the number that we have on the screen here, you can text her and she can help guide you through the process of seeking out a Sallie Mae loan for this particular program. So April Cohn, she's on the screen right now, and her role is she's a student recruitment specialist, and you can text her at 571-293-0581 to inquire about the Sallie Mae loans or any other, if you have questions about any other funding that we talked about on this screen. Next slide. Okay, so this slide just really, it shows about the actual course dates and where it's located. So the course format is in person, like I said. We do find an incredible value in having the course in person at our Middletown campus. The course starts on October 9th through December 11th. So that's a Monday, Wednesday from 5:30 to 7:30. So like Chris mentioned, it's 2 nights a week for about 9 weeks. It's located at our Middletown campus in the Core and Development Center. The cost of the program, you would be investing $16.99. And like I said before, you can seek out a Sallie Mae loan or other resources to help with that. And then at the bottom of the screen, we're just pointing out that you can register online, or you can call our registration team at 540-868-7021. We will be following up with all of these slides as long as we have your email. So if you could please put your email in the chat box, unless you've already fully registered for this event. And then we can get all these slides to you so that you don't have to remember all these numbers that I'm giving you.
Hey, Becky, can I speak to the breakdown of the class real
Sure.
quick?
Yep.
So some of the lessons learned we've taken on this class or teaching this class over the last 5 years is to sit for the exam, you have to have 35 hours of in-classroom project management training. So previously we had structured this course as 4 hours, 1 night a week for 9 weeks. And what we've noticed is, or what I've noticed is, this information can be dry at times. You're coming into this class right after work, probably a long day after work. We posted this class on Wednesdays, so you're right in the middle of your week, in 4 hours of class. It became or proved out to be a little bit daunting. And so what we decided to do is break this down a little bit further into bite-sized chunks, right? So you can retain the information, have that information that you learned on Monday come in with additional questions on Wednesday, come in with questions on that following Monday. And so it's just those 2 hours a night on those Mondays and Wednesdays. That keeps you a little more fresh, gets you back to your family or personal life, or going back to work, as I've noticed some of our students actually do, and it keeps it a little more tangible, a little more real, a little more digestible. So that's why we chose to break this down a little further into 2 nights a week across those 9 weeks. That was it.
Thank you for adding that. All right, so next slide.
So yeah, so I'll speak to this slide. This is how you tell if you're eligible to sit for the exam. So you have kind of option A, option B there. The difference between those two options is whether you have a 4-year degree yet or not. Option A is if you have a secondary degree, meaning high school diploma, an associate's degree, or as again, this is a global certification. So if you have some sort of global equivalent, right? You graduated university over in the United Kingdom or something like that. So it requires not only experience, but that project management education. So dropping down to that project management education at the bottom, this course covers that. It's 36 hours. The requirement's 35 hours. We cover 36 hours, give you that additional hour of education, lets you ask those additional questions or even help work on the application. The requirement regarding the project management experience is tweaked over the years, so it's a minimum of 5 years of non-overlapping project management experience. With about 7,500 hours of leading and directing projects. That does not mean that you have to have the title of project or program manager. You just have to lead or direct certain aspects of that. You can lead it or direct it as a project analyst or a manufacturing developer or manufacturing manager. It's just project management or project leadership experience. I've had folks, oftentimes, the students come in the first night or two and ask those questions. Hey, I don't have that real work experience, and so we talk through it and start to show over the work life experience or over their careers where they have actually led and worked on projects. And so we build out their application, their exam, or their experience based on that. And so it should not be, this information and requirements should not be daunting. Don't let it turn you away from the value of a PMI, PMP certification. Looking over at the column B, again, the only difference is that experience and whether or not you have the general education. So this is that 4-year degree. So you have to have a minimum of 3 years of experience of non-overlapping project management experience and only 4,500 hours of leading and directing projects. Again, don't let those big numbers, with the comma, those 4-digit numbers scare you there. We can walk and work through that during the class, and you'll start to have that. I guarantee you'll have that aha moment of, oh, I have had an opportunity, or I have led projects throughout my career. And even at home, you can include some of those home projects. Hey, you led a refinishing of your basement, or an addition to your home, or unfortunately, recent COVID times, you've led the project of establishing an at-home classroom for your kids, and those things can be identified and counted as project management experience. So that's the certification eligibility requirements. We typically cover those the first night of the course. Just to touch on the project management education that we provide, this 35 hours or 36 hours that we provide over at Laurel Ridge is good for the for your life regarding project management education. So you sit for the course, life events happen, you determine that you don't have time to take the exam at the end of this course, and decide that you're going to take it 6 months. 6 months down the road. That does not mean you need to come back and take this course again. This education is good until you decide to sit for the exam. Next slide. Speaking of the exam, as we've mentioned during this conversation, it is a rigorous exam. It's 180 multiple choice questions, 175 scored questions, and 5 unscored or pre-test or test type questions, as we've all experienced in sitting for the ACT or SATs, right? And so you get a little less than 4 hours to take this test. You get 2 10-minute breaks. It's all computer-based, primarily computer-based training administered by Pearson. So you go into a test center, you sit down at a computer, and in 230 minutes, you come out hopefully with your PMP certification. PMI recognized that the world is changing, so they also offer an online proctored test, which you can take that from the comfort of your home or office while being monitored via webcam and microphone by someone on the other end of that webcam and microphone. I highly encourage going into one of the Pearson VUE testing centers, but I also have a few students who have actually done the online proctor testing, and we can get into the benefits of each of those, or the pros and cons of each of those during the class, and it's all at your convenience really. The exam is administered in English. As I mentioned, it's broken down in 3 different domains: people, processes, and business environment, with, again, the primary focus on those processes that help you execute your projects most efficiently and effectively to achieve, on time, on budget, and within scope. And of course, how do you accomplish these projects? That's utilizing people resources or human resources. Let's see, once you do apply for the exam, you have 1 year to take that exam. If you don't pass the first time, you can take it 2 times in a year. If you don't pass it over those 3 times in the year, then you have to sit out, I believe it's 6 months before you can reapply and retake it. At the end of it, whether you pass or fail, you'll get a printed copy of your exam results right after you take that, and that'll include the pass-fail status and what level of proficiency at each of those 3 domains, whether you're proficient, moderately proficient, or below proficient. You do not have to be proficient at all 3 in order to pass the exam. Next slide. Again, the value that this brings and why this certification is so well respected is that you're continuing to learn in order to maintain your certification. So once you achieve your certification, you can't rest on your laurels as a new certified project manager. There is a 3-year recertification period. And what that means is every 3 years, you have to have 60 continuing educational credits or professional development credits, as it's identified there, the PDCs, right? So you're out there looking at continuing to better yourself as a project manager. You're reading books on the topic, you're watching webinars at the topic, or if you're so inclined, you're joining our local Shenandoah Valley community of the PMI WDC chapter and listening to key speakers talk on, the hottest topics within the project management field, listening to agile professionals, listening to risk professionals, or listening to folks who are experts on earned value, which is also oftentimes in the federal government one of those difficult topics and to overcome when trying to manage your project via earned value. And then there's also a recertification application fee every 3 years. Next.
Okay, I'll take the slide.
Okay.
So we also wanted to mention that we also have a series. It's a 4-part series on project management. We call it 4 Key Processes to Delivering Success. The series kicks off with the project management plan. Then it goes into stakeholder management, project schedules, and risk management. Each one of those courses can be taken a la carte or together as a series bundle. We do encourage students to take it as a series bundle instead, just for the flow of an actual project that you're working on throughout the whole entire series. This kicks off on September 6th, wraps up on September 27th. It's from 5:30 to 8, and some of the classes actually go to 8:30. This particular series is also in person at the Middletown campus. The reason that we offer this program is sometimes folks decide, well, before I jump both feet forward into the project management certification prep, I might just want to get my feet wet with learning a little bit more about some of the key processes and see if this is right for me. This is a low investment at $349, and it allows folks to come in and just learn a little bit more about these processes before taking the plunge into the full program. This is not a cert-wise program. This is a homegrown program that our very own expert instructor, Chris Grassmonk, put together with his knowledge and use of the PMI PMBOK guide. And if you are interested in that course, again, you can reach out to April and talk further about any questions that you might have. Next slide, please. Okay, so we are at the end of our presentation today. I'd love to give you guys some time to ask any questions that you might have. And after that, we'll just go over who to reach out to with certain questions as you think of them. Any questions right now for any one of us? Okay, so I guess we have done a great job covering everything possible in this presentation today. But if not, and if you think of questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. The first person on the list here is April. April is a great resource for all students. She has her her actual cell phone number on there to text to inquire about any questions that you might have about the information session today. And also to get started, if you're ready to register, feel free to also reach out to her and find out what your next steps are to register as well. And then there's my contact information there. I am the program director. Feel free to reach out to me at my email or my phone. And then we do have contact information for our instructor in case you happen to have very specific content questions about the class. That's when you would reach out to the instructor. But then any other types of questions that you have that are more basic in nature, just about the program or how to get started, or you know, location or anything like that, just reach out to either April or myself. All right, so Chris, April, do you guys have any last words of information before I close out the session for today?
Nothing to add on my side, Becky. Thanks, and thanks for the opportunity.
Same here. All right. Well, hopefully we'll be seeing you in class come September or October if you decide on the series or the actual PMP certification course. Thank you.